is our first podcast that we're filming, right?
Yeah.
We're here for educational purposes, to educate people about substance abuse, mental health, addiction, things that follow. And I feel like the best way to get started is to begin with the professionals, with the people who've been in the field many years and have been at the front line in helping people overcome addiction. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Albert. Myself, my name is Vahe.
I'm Ron Johnson,
Yeah.
a substance abuse counselor here.
And I'm Dr. Albert, I guess.
You're still
The
Dr.
only
Albert.
one left.
The one and only Dr. Albert. Can you tell us how long you've been in the field and kind of, how you got started in helping people with addiction? Because it's such a specific thing. We don't hear too many people going to school for addiction studies or to help people who might be battling with substance abuse or mental health.
First of all, I guess thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
And before I jump into the answer, I wanted to also thanks to people who, came up with this initiative to reach out to people who are in need. And as we all know, our nation is suffering and we are in addiction epidemics right now, and a lot of people dying, obviously, and this is a matter of life and death. That's why we thought this is going to be very, very important to reach out over there and spread the message that there is help, there is a way out. Right now, about
Definitely.
me, I'm a medical professional. Actually, you can call me a mental health professional. I'm a trained psychiatrist. I hold several different types of licenses, and one of them going to be in clinical psychology. Graduated back in 1996, residency in psychiatry right after that, and then started working in a field. Obviously, beginning was per se, we should probably define what we mean by saying field, because
Right.
it's changed a lot throughout years. And then back in the days, it was like most of the mental health and classic medicine involved in treatment of people with psychiatric diseases, and also on top of that, some people with some addictions, and most of the physicians didn't have any proper training how to deal with these people. And then there were specific special hospitals which closed down, and then there was no funding and things like that. And the field of addiction disappeared for a while. And fortunately, coming back as a science about like 15-16 years ago, when the insurances started recognizing this as a disease, and the disease
Right.
model or disease concept evolved. And then obviously, if it's a disease, there has to be medical professionals or mental health professionals involved, and somehow need to be paid. And then all this politics and everything behind that. Eventually, we end up with the field, which may be kind of described the way that exists now. Okay, about me, I guess a little bit why I end up in this. It's
Sorry to cut you off. How did you realize that this was, what you wanted to pursue in life? What was that first, moment of like, okay, I feel like this is my purpose?
that has a pretty long answer, actually. And I think if I go deep into it, we're gonna spend the full time on that.
we
But
have time.
okay. So
Go
this
ahead.
is the thing. I'm coming from a culture where alcohol is accepted, meaning it's part of our culture. We drink, we have a lot of fun. No one thinks you're an alcoholic when you spend all your day chasing alcohol. Drink several days on a row and then miss the job, miss the family. Get tickets, get busted and things like that, right? It's part of our culture. And nowadays, even you go somewhere and alcohol on a table, and then you have a decision not to pick up a glass or whatever it is, they are like, are you a man or what? You need to drink with us, right? And I think most of it is true for the other cultures as well. So by saying this, I've been introduced to alcohol from a young age, and then coming from a family where my father was an active alcoholic, and then I think a lot of disasters, including incarcerations and very sad things to whole family started off from that. And obviously I got introduced to alcohol as well. Alcohol was the first journey. Obviously you don't like the taste, but you like the aftermath of drinking the alcohol. And eventually at my early years in medical college, with alcohol, I started experimenting with some other stuff that considers to be hardcore in a sense. Back in the days, it was not to this extent, meaning you if you wanted to do something, it wasn't easy to find, and then not everyone had enough money to spend. Just imagine the time of morphine, right? Right. Vials of morphine, and then it was pretty expensive and things like that. Experimenting with morphine, just to fit into that crowd where I was, to be part of that, to be that cool guy in a sense, and not understanding that I have nothing to do with this. It just the mind that plays tricks, and then obviously you end up with a disaster. I'm kind of cutting short this story, and then wanted to keep some privacy probably. Obviously after a while and a lot of other stuff that I witnessed in my life, I came to a point where I decided to stop. As I told you, the addiction became a science or medical division very recently. 15, 16 years are pretty recent in timing, and I'm talking about 33 years ago. And I was pretty rough to get rid of this problem, actually, to stop. And then imagine again the culture as a factor in there saying, what, you're not a man, you cannot handle this? What is this? What's wrong with you?
Right.
I mean, and that shaming and guilt and all kinds of things were popping up all the time, actually. And then you wanted to stay that cool guy and show and prove to everyone that you're different than anybody else. Bottom line, with God's grace, I truly believe there was something bigger than myself, and then that saved me, helped me to change my life. And then obviously I graduated the medical school. How I decided to get into psychiatry, that was one of the unexplained parts of my insanity, I would say. After graduation,
do you see unexplained parts of your insanity?
Unexplained. Even
that's an interesting way.
I don't have
I like that phrase.
Very philosophical.
I'm gonna be a little bit of mixing everything, Spanish, Russian, Armenian, English, whatever it is. So please bear with me. All right, bottom line. So I don't know why I decided to get into residency in psychiatry. I'll be honest with you. My decision was, my sister is a physician, and she was in. She's an anesthesiologist, and then there was a division where you work in ICU, and then see this whole people with wounds and guns and very problematic people, right? When you have a problem, where do you go? You go to ICU, right? And she was working in an ICU, and she was an anesthesiologist. I thought, okay, it should be a good medicine, that's how the physician should look like, right? Probably I'm gonna go into anesthesiology. But bottom line, the day I went to this place where I need to turn in my application for residency, I filled out the application for anesthesiology, turn it in. Now I'm walking to to the bus station to catch a bus, and then something happens to me, and then I felt inside that I don't belong to that. And then I went back. Long story short, I filled out a brand new application and into psychiatry residency. To be honest with you, I was expecting that to be much less stressful than anything else. I was kind of, trying to find easy way because everybody was going into residency or trying to get into residency. So I thought that would be easy. It came up pretty competitive, and then there was, I think, 16 people applying for two spots. And again, magically somehow I got admitted.
You were one of the two.
Yeah, one of the two. And I got admitted into this residency of psychiatry, City Psychiatric Hospital. Imagine, all those departments. There were like 7 departments or whatever it is, behind the bars type of thing. And then here I am, a person brand new cooked, off of the medical school and facing this. And I'm like, okay, today I have a headache. Today I have this. Today I have all the negative things. And what's going on? What's happening? And then, but I survived. And by the way, a friend of mine, who was the head of one of the departments, we became friends afterwards. He told me, after the break, if you return back, it means there is something wrong with you. And guess what? I returned back.
Yeah,
you returned back.
That was the story.
Well, I feel like working with people who are part of that demographic, who are challenged with mental health issues. I feel like people who really understand those type of people have to be somewhat able to fit in their shoes or kind of see from their perspective. So I would say it's one of the most difficult, challenging of the medicines. You touched upon a few things that I wanted to dive deep into. You mentioned morphine, and this was, you said 32 years ago.
This was 1992. I believe it makes 32 years, something like that.
So, the progression. So morphine is an opioid, right?
Right.
So morphine is an opioid, and today we see a lot of opioids on the streets, but they're not morphine.
Oh God, morphine is a kid's toy today, I would call it.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're dealing with fentanyl epidemics right now. Fentanyl is, for you to understand. Morphine, as a matter of fact, is the measure of power while we talk about or compare to different types of opioids. So let's put it this way. Morphine is like, equals to 1 numerical or mathematical 1, and fentanyl would be 10,000.
Wow.
I mean, for you to know, what does it mean? What's behind that? Okay, numbers are very different, but people die. Just the lethal dose of fentanyl is 10,000 times less, and 10,000 times it's 10,000 times stronger, and just people die because it's a very simple thing. Let's say somebody is using fentanyl and buying from an A person, and then changes the person, the drug dealer, right, gets from an X person, and then may easily overdose and die because simply God knows who prepared, who made that powder, and what's the strength. Because these people who cook fentanyl, and by the way, it's very, very cheap. I believe, and I heard stories, rumors, obviously those things are kind of controlled by DAs and, sheriff's department and special forces. It's very, very cheap to cook, and California started cooking it.
What do you mean by cook? So you're saying that there's ingredients that are coming?
Correct.
You
can get into Home Depot, get some of the ingredients, and then go to, let's say, CVS, get the other part. And then if you have some knowledge on, or somebody trained you in the basics of chemistry, so you can kind of cook it, in other words, or synthesized in medical terminology or chemical terminology, right?
Can I ask you a question? You had mentioned earlier that because of your culture, morphine and alcohol, it was much more difficult to get the help that you needed because of the cultural
stigma.
Yeah, stigma. Do you feel that we're faced with a stigma now in this country, within this culture, that is making it more difficult for people to get help?
That's a great question. And I truly believe, yes, there is a stigma and shaming people for using drugs used to be the method to qualify these people. Bottom line, you're an addict, right?
Right.
And you're never gonna change.
Right.
You are the mistake of the family.
Right.
You
The
know,
weakness.
bad apple, you're the weakness, you're this, you're that, without understanding that, just a simple human curiosity can throw anybody into an addiction. We need to understand one fact. It's a proven fact by science at this point in time. It's a brain disease. It's a disease of brain chemistry.
Right.
When you use those substances that hijacks your chemistry, you're not the owner of your own brain chemistry and eventually thoughts, right?
Right.
So that kind of turns you into this, let's call it zombie.
Yeah,
I mean,
zombie,
nowadays,
literally zombie.
everybody talks about zombie apocalypses and things
It's
like
happening.
that being ready.
I mean, in a sense.
Believe it or not,
Go to downtown, you'll see
it's
a lot of zombies.
it's happening. Yeah. Go to downtown Philly. I mean, a lot of videos, YouTube videos, you can see them. What is it? It's a method of controlling people. But how are you going to control? By controlling that brain chemistry. How are you going to control the chemistry? Putting another chemical there in there, right? And the culture does not recognize this. The culture, as I said, very recently started seeing American culture is very unique. It's a mixture of different cultures, and I'm an immigrant. I'm coming from an immigrant family myself, and then what we do, we bring our culture into this one and kind of mix with it, right? This melting pot is a representation of different cultures. So we have this very unique approach. None of the other countries, let's say, in France or in England or in Germany, because it's pretty, nowadays it's pretty mixed, but it's not uniform to have a uniform answer to a question. So that's why we see very different things, but I'm gonna kind of confirm the fact that there is a huge stigma, and then we don't want to see the problem. And then we do not believe that people get better. People can change their life. As I'm seeing here as an alive example, and being in this industry, in this profession, know a lot of people who recover and become, full, great member of the society, contributors of the progress, right? We know a lot of people. So yes, there is a stigma, and still the culture needs to change. I think things are happening.
I think you hit it right on the head when you said this is, in America, it's a melting pot, which it really is. And, and within American, if you want to call it culture, right? You have all these different cultures, and some will look at it as a weakness, right? What I have found, particularly the Asian culture. In treatment, I have treated one Asian client because it is kept inside the house. They don't want it kept, it's considered a weakness. It's considered a blemish on the whole family, on the whole community, which is really a tragic situation because they are one of the demographics that is being hit hardest by this.
Wow. And we don't hear about that.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm going to say. You don't hear about it.
Culture hides the problems, I think. But then going back to the history, right? 1800s, late 1800s, beginning of 1900s, American culture is evolving. And then guess what? First pure heroin, China white, right? First opioid users were Chinese. There are a lot of historical facts.
But England brought it over, and they gave us tea. Or no, we gave them tea. I can't remember how.
Yeah, right. And then that was a way of controlling those workers.
That's right. That's what they did.
Created this whole mess, and which kind of continues the past 150 years.
Yeah,
I'm saying?
Boxer
the echo we see today with fentanyl, it started back in the day.
As a, I would say, member of the younger generation. We're talking about the stigma around, substance abuse and getting help and kind of admitting that, this thing can truly just hijack your brain chemistry, control who you are, change your personality. But, in my generation, I see a lot of glorification of substance use. Like,
it's a good point.
You see, like music, for example. Music, contemporary music is very heavily focused on, glorifying drugs, alcohol use. I want to use the word polygamy to be more professional, but I would say that this glorification of drugs and partying, right? Like I would say weed, right? Marijuana is considered like a class A, narcotic, right? Equivalent to heroin in a lot of countries.
Federally, I guess. But
yeah,
not
federally
statewide.
illegal.
It's interesting. I have a friend from Guadalajara, right? He says that in Guadalajara, if you're walking around and you're drunk, right, they'll bring you home. The police will pick you up and bring you home.
Which
but
used to be the case here in the United States, in Los Angeles.
Oh, it
Have
did?
you ever heard it? Of course. Have you ever heard of it?
That's interesting.
No, I never
Yeah.
did hear that.
I think about like in back in 70s, if you
Oh,
back in 70s, if you're drunk, cruising around even with your
Right.
car, and then the police stops you, they will take you home. No tickets, no rest, no none of those things. The rest
Yeah.
evolved later. Rest.
Right. Well, it's interesting because my friend was saying that they will do the same thing where he was from in Guadalajara. But if you're caught smoking marijuana, you go right to jail.
Yeah.
No questions asked. So, I mean,
Still,
there's
the culture involved, right?
the
Cultural
culture's
approach.
involved not only in terms of seeking treatment, but in terms of actually how they view the substance itself, which is very different. I mean, I think it's in Amsterdam where they have legalized heroin, right? As long as you have a little card, you can get this little card and you can go and you can get your injection.
I think it's called like opium dens or something like that.
Well, this little card, you have to
It's
show.
called harm reduction. It actually, yeah, you're right. It's a recent thing, but yeah, about like 25 years ago, they came up with this harm reduction model where you can, if you have your own heroin, and then you're an IV user, you can, go to the booth and ask them to use like a clean needle to shoot your heroin. I mean, that was existing for a while, and then obviously now it's legalized.
It's legalized where you can actually go someplace, get your heroin, you have a work card, and if you don't show up for work, the heroin is taken away. So it's an incentive not to call in sick. Because otherwise you will be sick. I mean, it's a sad situation.
Right, and I think there is another element in there too. Buying the heroin, the fact of buying heroin, it's like breaking the law, right?
Right.
And then if you get caught with that, you're facing jail time. And then what is it? It's like an expense for the government, right? So they wanted to kind of eliminate that, and also transmission of diseases through, shared needles and stuff. It has a lot of other things behind it as well. So that's why it's called, harm reduction.
Those are good points I would really like, in future to bring up and talk about what harm reduction is really all about. Because the only harm reduction is to stop using. Because when you're using, the harm is you, and the only way to reduce it is to stop using. And that's what I, in doing this podcast, I really think that it's a great thing because, if it can just reach one person, that one person's life is everything, and I believe it's going to reach a lot more than just one person. But what I'm saying is that I really want to touch upon subjects as we do this that aren't touched upon, and really give people the truth and speak our own truth as to what's happening out there. Because as you said, it is an epidemic. We have a 9/11 every 2 to 3 weeks. That's how many people are dying from fentanyl. I mean, more people have died from fentanyl, 200,000 have died more than Vietnam, more than the Civil War, and those things were in the paper every single day. You don't see fentanyl in the
You
paper
don't.
every single day. I mean, what is behind that? What is going on? I mean, there seems to be such a lapse in logic. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on, but
Yeah, those are the exact words.
And
that
the
needs to be
laws,
said.
the laws surrounding
Lapse in logic.
fentanyl. Sorry to cut you off, Doc, but I want to touch upon the laws surrounding fentanyl versus heroin use, or dealing heroin versus fentanyl. Because fentanyl is technically considered a pharmaceutical, so
That's
the I guess the laws are a bit different, right, when it comes to like dealing heroin versus dealing fentanyl.
they're different. I mean, it's changing.
Even though
It's
fentanyl is what, like 100 times stronger,
right,
or-
it's 100 times, but you're facing less time
Right.
because. But now those laws are changing because it is becoming such an epidemic. People are asking these questions, but why so late?
right.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, this has been going on for a long time. Why so late are we beginning to ask these
And around
questions?
election time too.
Well, you're going to
spice up
throw
the
that in
controversy.
there. We're really from the... No, I'm just kidding. No, so there's all sorts of things that I think people, whether you're an addict or not, or you love an addict or you don't love an addict, whatever, people need to know what's going on. They need to know how they're being manipulated. They need to know where they can get help. They need to know that they're, regardless of the stigma or anything else attached to this, people are dying, families are being crushed. A friend of mine who she's been missing for 3 weeks. We have looked everywhere for her. Brilliant girl. Brilliant. And she had major alcohol problem. Just alcohol was her thing. And it's interesting because in treatment, and you can vouch for this because you've been doing this for so long, but I was told that when you saw death, it was mainly alcohol. I mean, heroin addicts and meth addicts could go on for a long time miserably and looking like hell, right? And having no kind of life, but they were alive. But now with fentanyl, it's like you hear about it all the time. Is that correct?
It's not even surprising anymore.
It's not surprising.
Right,
It's becoming
and
the
to be
norm.
honest with you, I'm not even hearing about heroin recently. It's very, percentage-wise, the patients we see in treatments, I would say probably 20% off of all the opiate addicts or, opioid, people who are coming for treatment for opiates, about 20%, 30% going to be heroin. It's like it considers to be luxury because of the price. And then, by the way, that expression of, lapsing logic, I wanted to bring this up. A patient of mine was sharing the fact that he bought 1,000 pills of fentanyl and paid only $500. I want you to count how
50
much
cents a
would it
pill.
50 cents. Right. And I'm thinking to myself, I mean, what is the point for the people who make this
Right.
to sell at this price? I mean, you definitely not making money.
Right.
Then what is the goal? Right. I mean, obviously, if you buy one or two, you're going to pay probably 10, 15, 20, 40 bucks per pill. That still makes sense, but not 50 cents, right? There is no logic. So it's pretty hard to explain. There may be a
very
lot
hard.
of different, conspiracy theories behind, but those are the facts that we see. And then, again, probably the population that comes for help with with opioid problem, about like 25-30% would be heroin, another 65-70% gonna be fentanyl, right? Because it's cheap.
Yeah, and just going off of the lapse of logic is, as you had pointed out, fentanyl being so much more deadly, why would whoever is selling it want to kill off their own market?
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's something that's always
That's
kind of baffled
there are
me.
a lot of this is a lot of questions that we can raise, which does not make sense as we talking about this, right? 50 cents does not make sense. killing own customers does not make sense.
Something's
Right?
going on.
Right.
This is where we get
Something's
into the
going on.
controversy.
I mean, this is probably a question to our audience. What you guys think? Why is this happening? And then, I mean, some people were telling me, we're living in a world where everything gonna go towards the control and things like that, and they wanted to get rid of those addicts. This is a burden and a lot of cost to the government, blah
Right.
blah, things like that. I'm not sure. I don't know.
I don't know either, but you just brought up the word controversy. This is where it goes into controversy.
Right.
And what is that? Is controversy a way of telling us, don't look?
I think a
Turn
better
your head,
word.
it's controversial.
I think a better word I wanted to use was conspiracy. Because
Is that another word? I mean, conspiracy, people get labeled as conspiracists. Oh, they're just a conspiracist. Is that a way to just sweep something
Yeah,
under the rug?
definitely
Or
think
has
so.
research really been done?
I mean, research has been done. Independently, but not to. It hasn't produced fruit in a way where it's like it solved the problem in a way, right? Like we're doing research to, gain knowledge, have information about what's going on, but the problem's not being solved. So that's where I feel like the conspiracy comes in because, like you guys mentioned, like there's a lot of things that don't make sense. Why would you, as a drug dealer, I'm not a drug dealer, or nor I could think as one, but economically speaking, right? If you are selling a product and you have a customer, you want your customer to come back. Why would you want your customer to not come back? And then why would you sell for such a cheap number to your customer? So it's like, it raises the question, and I mean, the
Yeah, I
audience
think
can
one
answer.
of the explanations would be, to spread the disease in a sense, because not
Right.
everyone gonna die, right? But it's gonna be because it's cheap. A lot of youngsters gonna be buying, and then
It'll produce more
you brought up a
customers,
lot
and
of a very good point of living in a glorifying culture, right? And rap culture. I don't have anything against rap or anybody else, you know what I'm saying? But we hear a lot of nowadays. We can hear rap, which is a gospel in a sense. But nowadays, I mean, yes, there are so many ways of glorifying drug use, right? So, and on top of that, there has to be an access to cheap drugs. I think that's probably the reason. And then I believe
Right.
either that's already happening. The price is going to go up, whatever it is, because it does not make sense. It does not.
Yeah.
You can think of any, a lot of thousand different answers, but I think to spread this problem, and that's how we end up in epidemics, because it's pretty cheap.
Yeah, as professionals, you guys have helped a lot of people who have been suffering with fentanyl use specifically. I kind of just want to, from your experience, what region of the U.S. would you say is most impacted by fentanyl? From your experience, like dealing with clients and patients,
I think
where are they usually from?
that's a good question. I don't want to open up, some secrets. I'm kidding. But this is the thing. I mean, we see patients from all over the United States, I guess. And then my impression is in rural America, in rural areas, the problem is much worse.
Yeah.
And I think because of the education, because of the absence of treatments, absence of professionals who can enlighten people about the problem. I mean, whatever explanation I guess you can come up with, but my impression is people who are coming from Montana, Oklahoma, rural areas mostly, where is lack of jobs, lack of opportunities, and then I think people easily triggered and get into this problem. We've seen families, the whole family into fentanyl addiction. Used to be in meth, now they are in meth and fentanyl, or in fentanyl
Meth.
itself.
I hear meth all over
Meth
from
is
my
crazy.
clients. I'll just say it. I mean, some come from the Midwest. Somebody said, "Oh yeah, Oklahoma is just like a war zone," and I'm thinking, really? Oklahoma's like waving wheat in a blue sky, right? I mean, these are the impressions that we have, but the actuality of what's going on, it seems to be a different picture, right?
And you mentioned meth, right? So meth and you could correct me on this if I'm wrong, is an upper. So it gives someone like energy, as opposed to opiates, which probably makes someone, sleepy, or it's a downer. So how is it that two substances with contrasting effects end up being, used by the same person?
And I believe a lot of people in our audience maybe may know that when you use downer, obviously you're sedated, you want it to sleep, you're nagging out, you know what I'm saying? And then you don't want anyone to find it out, right? You want it to hide behind something. So they smoke meth on top of that to kind of
Balance it
adjust,
out.
to fix it. But sometimes I compare this to when you see it on, when you push the gas and the brake at the same time, right? On your car, what's going to happen to your car engine?
Right.
That's what's going to happen to your brain, I guess, if you push the downer and upper together. That's why they get freezed.
And isn't there something about the high itself by synthesizing the two together?
Of course,
Yeah.
of course. It's a totally different high. And then I think we heard of mixing those two things and shooting.
Yeah,
That's a totally different, injecting, intravenous use, in other words. So to
Wait, just to clarify, you mean like, because there's different ways of doing those substances. So
Sure.
you're saying basically people mix fentanyl and meth and inject both at the same time.
Yes, that's right.
That's crazy.
That's right. And then the Philly, whatever is happening at the Philadelphia nowadays, and it's actually spreading. It's not only Philadelphia; it goes to big major cities, and a lot of people, you see those people like, excuse me, very uncomfortable position, and they freeze, right? They started mixing it with an anesthetic called Xylazine.
What even is that?
It's an anesthetic, actually, used in in animal treatment practice and things like that. In many different ways. And then they are chemists, right? Addicts are chemists. They are very bright, actually, and I'm not kidding. And that brightness killed them. And that's probably somebody came up with the idea of mixing those two things. By the way, I had a patient today at my office, and then he named something, brand new version of ecstasy. I guess I would compare that to ecstasy. So he tested positive for benzos, amphetamines, cocaine, and he also said obviously the instant drug test wasn't measuring the ketamine, but he said it's a mixture of everything, and MDMA as well.
Wow.
Right. So new things are coming in, and it's supposed to be a substitute to cocaine. And my belief is it's going to be pretty cheap. I don't know the price, never asked the price, but what they do, whatever, those manufacturers need to throw into the trash, they try to come up with some new kind of thing, without losing anything. So I guess this is one of the products.
Wow.
So it's coming from Colombia, if I'm not mistaken, Colombia or somewhere else. But bottom line, that's already in the United States, or may even easily be made here.
That's pretty interesting, because I remember you mentioning like someone like a kid, right? Like, how does someone start doing drugs, right? Like, they're just curious, they might be experimenting. But nowadays, you have all this crap coming out, on the streets. Do you think there's a difference between back then, when people could experiment, those 70s hippies and things like that, and then, they could just stop doing whatever they were doing, as compared to today, where you just kind of like do it once and you're
definitely
hooked?
There is a huge difference. In one word, I would say there is a total chaos today. That would be my answer to that. I mean, if back in the days it was controlled somehow, you get caught, and then Proposition X pushes you to go through the court, getting that on your record. You have to go to the treatment, complete the treatment. If you're not doing this, doing that, probations, paroles, things like that. Nowadays, it's so widespread. No place, no spot for people who are ending up into jail because of the substance abuse and then crime behind that. I think definitely there is a huge difference, and then it's much more chaotic today, I would say.
Chaotic. And I mean, there used to be a time when it's natural for someone to go through an experimental stage in their life where they maybe later in high school, early college, where they'll use something and they'll experiment, But now today it can be a death sentence.
Oh, yeah.
Someone can take a hit of a blunt or a joint or whatever you want to call it, and they're dead. That's it, so.
Yeah, per se, I would say, experimentation, it's a natural part to human development, right? Erickson, there was a psychologist, Erickson, the father of the theory, and he was telling that it's a human nature to experiment with things, and innately we have that code in our genetics to experiment with our consciousness. We wanted to change that consciousness, change the mood. That's why it's called mood altering, I guess.
Mood altering, I like that.
I like how you touched upon a consciousness because, I wanted to get into the topic of like LSD, microdosing, shrooms, and things like that. Typically, things like that aren't considered like hardcore drugs, right? Like people, I haven't heard of I mean, that wouldn't be true.
LSD is pretty hardcore as far as I'm concerned.
No, I meant like, no, it is hardcore. It's definitely hardcore. It's for sure hardcore. It's made in labs.
If you've had a bad trip, it's definitely hardcore.
Yeah. But, it's like you hear so much about fentanyl, meth, and people being addicted and not being able to overcome those things. You rarely hear about people who are addicted to LSD or shrooms, even though I've had experience with a person in the past who, did LSD one time. They liked it so much, they would do like 4 tabs a day and go throw up in their mom's bathroom. Anyways, but...
Mom's.
Yeah, mom's bathroom at night.
It's always a mother.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Poor mother. Anyways, but... So there's this new thing, and there's documentaries being made on it. I watched a documentary on Netflix about LSD, and you have all these celebrities saying, like I did it and I had this crazy experience. It taught me some kind of lesson or something like that. And you hear oftentimes like people say, oh, there's professionals like doctors and lawyers. They go home, they microdose a little bit. It helps them think. I personally don't understand that. So what would you say is this whole talk about? What is this whole LSD, shrooms, and people microdosing?
The ayahuasca too, I think.
Ayahuasca. Why?
I guess it's a pretty broad topic. It's a large topic, actually, and new things are evolving, coming. I personally know very well-educated people, scientists, chemists, as a matter of fact. I have a couple in my head right now, in my thoughts, and then they work for a pharmaceutical company, well-known. I don't want to give the names and stuff, but both husband and wife with PhDs in analytical chemistry. Okay, so I want you to kind of imagine that situation. Both of them are on microdosing, so-called microdosing. This is something...
And that's daily.
It's daily. It's daily, actually.
Wow.
And then they were trying to preach me the whole scientific, benefit of microdosing and how your brain rewires, and then your thinking is much wider and you become wiser, things like that. I mean, all kinds of things, all kinds of scientific explanations. And then we end up talking about receptor site attachment and things like that. But I'll tell you from my own experience. About 2 years ago, we started ketamine treatment in one of our offices. The medication that's been approved by FDA called Spravato. Spravato is an intranasal spray of the ketamine. And then this is a medication that has been approved for so-called treatment-resistant depressions. Okay, for you two or for our public audience to know what's that, I mean, we see a lot of, as a psychiatrist, we see a lot of people who are willing to take the medication, specifically antidepressants, with very little effect.
Right.
And it's very unfortunate. You know, I mean, science is not perfect, obviously. Pharmaceutical science is not at the place where we know everything and anything about our brain and the chemistry. Obviously, whatever we synthesize as a medicine will not be helpful, right, for everybody. It's not something that everybody gonna benefit off of. Bottom line, we end up with a diagnosis called treatment-resistant depressions, right? So, and technically, to qualify for ketamine or Spravato treatment, you have to try you have to be at least on 3 different types of antidepressant medications for at least 6 months of a certain year, and then if there is no results on top of those medications, you should or you can receive the Spravato as well. So why I'm telling about this so long, I wanted to compare ketamine to, you know, LSD and you know, psilocybin and you know, those you know, psychedelics that's been abused, you know, and the history goes back to I would say 30s, 20s, 30s, and then peaking somewhere in 60s where the hippies generation coming and LSD, and there is a lot of history about that. But nowadays, ketamine, which is an anesthetic and used in medicine as an anesthetic, right? Kind of changed its direction and came up as a medication for depression.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I was very skeptical, to be honest with you, in the beginning. But you know, to be compliant to the regulations that the DA asks for, we had to do a lot of assessments. You know, depression inventories. You know, anxiety assessments, right before and after the treatment. And obviously, you know, we have a bright mind, right? We came up with some modification of this treatment in a sense. You know, the recommendation says, you know, you need to start from 228 milligrams intranasal spray, and then the session takes 1 hour, and after that, after 2 hours, the person can go home. You monitor the person, and they can go home. And then we decided that as far as we're talking about psychedelic effects, let's see what we can put on a TV. You know, those changing colors. You know, maybe pictures of
like
you know, universe. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then
Alien with like a triangle and the eye in it, like zooming in.
Yeah, actually, you wanted to touch the brain also with these colors. That was the idea, because you know, eye as a major input source to the brain need to pick up something, and without the dark room would be a good idea to have this TV showing, you know, different changing colors, right? You may think this is like getting high and having fun and things like that, but actually it has a scientific explanation, and I'll get a little deep into it. Meanwhile, trying to stay short, and obviously some kind of a music, so major auditory, you know, excitation of the brain. This is what I'm gonna tell you. Actually, our research showed we had, if I'm not mistaken, over 35 people. To be exact, I think 36. So we had a very good result.
Wow.
We have people who recovered, meaning they continue taking their antidepressants, and with an effect now after the treatment, after about 3 months of treatment, they continue taking their medications, and it seems like it's working. Now, I don't have the explanation what happened. Rewired, the brain changed, maybe.
So they're still taking their antidepressants.
Correct.
Now, could it be augmenting the antidepressant, or could they eventually possibly wean off the antidepressant that was not being effective or they were being resistant to, and just...
I think it's on case-by-case basis. You know, different people going to have different effects. I don't want to claim that everybody got well, but I would say certain number of people got that definite help. We saw the change, we monitored that, and then we collected the scientific data.
Right.
This is what you do technically when you assess for depression. You have certain score afterwards, right?
Right.
And then you see scores that describe depression, deep depression, different levels of depression. And then obviously after a while of treatment, you see the scores are going down and people are much happier. And then obviously over time you monitor the patient and you see that things are obviously changed and people are much more stable. And I'm talking about people who are been in treatment for their addiction, got their mental health treatment as well, but that was the missing puzzle piece.
I see.
And then I think we have a better result with this. By saying this, I don't want to glorify any of the psychedelics, honestly. It's a long story. I think we can talk about ibogaine treatments in Mexico or even nowadays in United States. There are different types of hallucinogenics used for treatments of addiction.
Right.
A lot of people claim that it works.
Right.
A lot.
Right.
Honestly, I don't have an answer, but one thing as for sure I can tell you, as a science, it's evolving, it's coming. Nowadays, we see a lot of books that preach the treatment or treatments with psychedelics. I think we're going to see that, treatment modalities coming pretty soon.
More and more. And being psychedelics, they are plant derivatives, right? Is that correct?
Again, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Because some of them going to be synthetics. Synthesized in laboratories. But bottom line, the origin is the plant.
Oh, I see.
Is
That's
mushroom
promising.
Considered a plant?
Yeah, it is
It's
a plant,
a
of
fungus.
course.
Really?
It's a plant.
Okay. That's not what my biology
It's a
teacher told me.
fungus among us.
You
like
can
that.
argue about that, but
It's a plant.
Okay. So, but so ketamine does have a psychedelic effect.
pretty sure, yes.
Okay. Because, I mean, I graduated from UCLA, go Bruins. Loved that place. Amazing school. But saw a lot of partying. And as you mentioned, people smoking joints or, smoking blunts and then not knowing it's laced with fentanyl, dying. A huge new thing has been ketamine. You'll see a lot of ketamine. What kids call it nowadays is CK, like Calvin Klein, which is like cocaine and ketamine mixed together. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is, you mentioned some of the benefits of it, but compared to the grand picture, do you think on a bigger scale it's more beneficial to humanity, or is it detrimental?
Okay, let's not forget that we're comparing two things, apples and oranges. Okay, we're talking about clinical situation where we have a depression and treating with a ketamine, right? And then we're talking about abusing, having fun. I'm going to ask you a question. If you don't have a headache, are you going to take Tylenol for headache? If you don't have a depression, why would you take ketamine? If you're not going through anesthesia, why would you shoot ketamine?
Right.
Those are two different things. I don't want to confuse our audience by saying this, but I wanted to say, yes, there is a medicinal use to ketamine, but it has to be done in very specific therapeutic or treatment settings under the control of your doctors, nurses, and make sure that you qualify for that. And then nowadays we see a lot of people who are Google certified, meaning Googling things and then come
Google
up with
doctors.
their diagnosis and then treatment methods and all kinds of things. You see them, talk to them, they know everything, and you have a feeling that there is nothing you can do for them, right? So trust your doctors, trust your nurses, and then make sure that you're taking proper care of your own mental health eventually, right? Because that's what you do. When you alter your consciousnness or you think like you're treating something, you're changing your chemistry that may be forever.
Right. So you said trust doctors. Of course, I feel like,
We trust you.
definitely we trust you.
I appreciate that.
We trust you for sure. But there's a lot of instances where people have trusted their doctor, and it's led to addiction. For example, with benzos, with oxys, there's a lot of stories you'll hear.
There's
I was on the
bad
football
doctors.
team. I broke my leg.
say.
They prescribed me oxy or whatever, some kind of opiate, and then boom, that person gets hooked to opiates, and then it leads to fentanyl because they're not able to pay for it anymore. So we're trusting the doctor, but to what extent? Like there should be some kind of knowledge about the type of drugs that they might prescribe. And specifically I want to get into benzos.
Well, benzos is one, but like the whole Matthew Perry thing where they were saying, let's see how much money we can get off this moron, right? I mean, a lot of doctors became doctors because they had good grades. Do you know what I mean? Not necessarily because they wanted to help somebody. So,
and in 10 years, they're going to be doctors because they have Chat GPT.
And I remember there was this one psychiatrist told me, boy, when she got her prescription pad, she realized how much money she could make, but she was very moral, very ethical, and she didn't go. But yeah, I mean, once they get a taste of money and all of a sudden it takes the signature, sure, that's why you have to, like what Dr. Albert said, is take your mental health into your own hands in the sense that get with doctors that you trust. You don't want to mess around with the noodle. I mean, messing around with the small toe is one thing, you can get a bad doctor, but still fix it. But when you're messing around with the brain, it's a whole nother show.
So how could we, as this might be a difficult question because you're a doctor, but how could we as regular people know if we should trust the doctor or not, right? Like there's doctors that prescribe Xanax and Oxy. So
I think this is a conversation that takes us into very sensitive, area and or subject. It's but that's a good question. Actually, yes, we do see people who are basically affected by the treatment. Okay, now obviously it's going to be again case by case basis, where there could be medical errors. Obviously, it's hard to say. I don't want to say that I know anybody who is just prescribing meds. I heard of, those kind of stories. I'm not sure which one is right, which one is wrong. But one thing for sure, I believe every medical professional knows the consequences of, abuse or overprescribing those medications. And I would say it goes back to the ethics that, professional ethics that doctors, nurses, prescribers exercise, right? And obviously we have very different morals, we have very different ethics. But I think, in general, professional ethics prohibits overprescribing unless it's very, very necessary. I'll be honest with you, I've seen situations with very, very, close family members suffering with cancer, being prescribed, high dosages of narcotics, medications just to sedate or alleviate the pain and suffering. And to be honest with you, there was a time when myself and several of my friends, also physicians, also doctors, standing next to one of our friend who was dying off of cancer, who was high on opiates. And I'm like,
wow,
bro, you really should think of the dosage. Let's cut this down. And then obviously all of us hopeful that he's gonna get better. Then I was thinking like what I'm gonna do with 120 milligrams of morphine and other types of opioids, and then God knows 60-70 milligrams of methadone on top, and then benzos, things like that. And I'm thinking like, how are we gonna help this guy to get out when he gets better? And he asked me one thing: I don't want to suffer. I don't want to take this pain. I don't see the reason to take this pain. And I thought to myself, he's right. So sometimes, overprescription comes with the situation, right?
Right.
Obviously, some of these people get out and then have a problem with opiates. The other ones really overprescribe just because they had a toe problem or something, minor pain and things like that. We see a lot of abuse, from the patient side as well. They combine different medications, including opiates, benzos,
or fake their condition.
fake the condition. It's already we're talking about addiction, right? When people fake the condition to get pills, we're already talking about disease. That's part of the disease, right?
But I think you brought up a really good point. Is it really is a patient to patient context,
That's
in the
true.
sense that not everybody fits under one umbrella. You have to really, especially with medication, you have to, as everybody's different, everybody's brain chemistry is different. You really need to get to know the patient intimately to understand what they need.
That's true. That's true. And what I meant by trust your doctors, know your research your doctors. Know your doctors, know the people who are going to be prescribing, helping you out, ask about their reputation. And then, obviously you can go ahead and research the treatment methods and everything. Nowadays, thankfully, thanks to God, we have a lot of different ways of approaching to different things. I see a lot of people that they combine, pills, alcohol together. That's a disaster.
It's a disaster.
And then, when they get into medical setting, professionals don't know where to start, which one to take care of first. And then now we think they may die, right? So we need to take care of the problem. So it's pretty complicated and really based on the ethics of the physician or people who are prescribing. That's unfortunate. There's still people who are prescribing left and right without thinking and making money off of the prescription. I don't even know how much you can make, honestly. I don't think it's a visible amount that you wanted to chase and exchange to your reputation and your
Hopefully.
ethics. But unfortunately, it happens.
It happens. Yeah, and I know I have a good doctor. Because he never gives me anything I want. So
That's good. That's also a good parent too.
That's you know a good doctor, they don't give you anything you really want.
Right.
That's true. That's true.
So, we talked about multiple different types of drugs and the consequences and, just broad topics. But where's the hope, right? Like, what's the solution to this, right? We talked about the problems, but, right, there's treatment, there's rehab, there's resources, there's mental health professionals. But if you would have to, give credit to one, let's say, right? Most of the time there's a combination of things, but what would you say is like the most important factor someone needs to consider if they are truly committed to recovery, to overcoming addiction?
It's a good question, actually. And my answer would be, it's pretty complicated, honestly. There is, in my opinion, addiction touches many different dimensions, right? Starting from family, childhood, get into it. You're going to see, childhood traumas, rape, incests, and then early exposure to drugs, family culture, culture of the nation, and then getting into relationships, obviously repeating, copying and pasting the relationships that your parents were carrying out, right? So it's pretty complicated in a sense to say, I'm going to take this point, and if I solve this one problem, the problem will be solved. The whole problem of addiction. And I wanted to say, we need to look into all the dimensions if we wanted to be successful in treatment, right? That's why I think most of our treatment centers offer all the modalities. I call them modalities, right? Including medical treatments, all kinds of advanced things starting, we talked about ketamine therapy, right? Proper medical management of the withdrawals, and then, afterwards, if there is a depression, anxiety, people monitored pretty thoroughly. And thankfully, we have a huge medical team, people very professional in addiction field. And that's great that, the science is evolving and we see a lot more professional trained and also with experience, and their input into this science really visible in my understanding. Obviously, the medical part, in my understanding, that kicks in first. You wanted to make sure that the patient is safe. And obviously the patient wanted to know if they are not gonna die at the detox place, right? So that's why you wanted to know what is the reputation of that detox place, what they are doing over there. Maybe visit, maybe call and talk to the doctor or a nurse, ask questions, do some research and things like that. I do understand that some of this is like kind of dream, because when you're high on something, you're not gonna call and get into details, but at least family members can do it, right? And then we know that I mean, a lot of people turn into homeless and then don't have any family, no one gonna call and things like that. I mean, we have all the all the layers of these people, suffering with addiction. So bottom line, suggestion would be to get into the details of the treatment. So first of all, you wanted to make sure that the patient is safe. They are not gonna die because of you as a physician or a medical team detoxing or decided this is right or wrong. Obviously, there are certain types of medical protocols, approved, discussed, and then based on ASAM criteria, based on DHCS, Department of Healthcare Services regulations and suggestions. Obviously, every treatment centers and every medical team comes up with certain types of medical treatment protocols, and that's what's applied. And then you wanted to know how long this center exists, and then what is the result, obviously by visiting or calling, whatever it is. This is the first stage, right? Right after that, people get discharged, from residential level of care, detox residential, right? Starts so-called partial hospitalization level of care, which considers to be an outpatient care, which means you still continue your intensive treatment. And we say 20 plus hours a week, right? If I'm not mistaken, you need to do at least 20 hours a week group and individual session therapy, assessments, and all the things necessary to make sure that the recovery is going towards stabilization. Right. And meanwhile, seeing again medical professionals to continue your medical treatment. So we're combining medical treatment with psychotherapy now, right? But at this stage, I would say psychotherapy considers to be, or at least in my understanding, the first line of the treatment. And we dig into the people's, stories. Everybody is a story, right? Everybody has its own specific, unique disease.
Yeah.
And then we need to know. That's why we need to assess. We need to do individual sessions. We need to understand what are we at, what is the problem, what is the combination of problems, then to address them, to come up with a treatment plan, right? And then to come up with the goals that will match to our patient's goals, right? The goal belongs to the patient.
Yeah.
You as a professional will not come up with a goal and say, this is my goal about your treatment, and you need to reach this goal in about a month. So that's not going to happen, right? Because the goal should come from the patient. So as DHCS and ASAM, American Society of Addiction Medicine, mandates us to do, it's to have measurable goals.
Measurable.
Okay, now we're talking about addiction, right? What would be the measure in things? It's pretty hard, but then we have different assessment tools to kind of measure and understand where are we at. By saying this, I want you to notice that the science grew a lot in sense of addiction treatment, and this is part of it, right? Obviously, this is not something that you can treat overnight. This is not something that's gonna change in one single medical shot, right? There has to be a combination of different things, and I'm trying to answer to your question by bringing up a lot of explanation to this. Now we're at the place where the patient does psychotherapy, stabilized on medication. What's next? What are we going to do with the guy? He's coming with the totally messed up lifestyle, incest in a history of the family, and then he still needs to interact with the, with the family members, and then, he still needs to go back, and now they are sober, right? The brain starts realizing the damage and the trauma that they passed through, right? This is partially a work done through psychotherapy, but then that's why we called rehabilitation, right? So this whole rehabilitation needs to pass through certain stages, I would call them, okay? And then obviously we talked about partial hospitalization, where 20 hours of intensive work Then we're going to go down to IOP, right? IOP is a less intense level of care where we wanted to see the patient finding a job, after you find the purpose, you need to find the energy to move on. So finding a job, and a lot of people get into relationship, which is not always a good thing, I would say, but then, people start new relationships, finding jobs and things like that. And first time in their life starting to take care of their bills and their responsibilities. This is what's qualified their social aspect to be changing, right? When you get into something new that you never done it. So finding a job and started taking care of your own bills and things like
back
that.
into society.
Yes, exactly. Reintegrating back to society. So this is a pretty complicated process. And in one word, I would like to say, you need to change your lifestyle. Nobody knows what the lifestyle is. My lifestyle is very different than yours. Yours is mine. Everybody has a unique lifestyle, and addiction or the disease is a part of that lifestyle. You stop the disease, you bring it, or arrest it, you bring it to control, but no change in lifestyle, I don't see an option of surviving.
No.
I think those are the people who go back to use. So, this is really pretty complicated. And then we wanted to see a patient who understands the complexity of this problem and working towards achieving many different goals, medical goals, psychotherapy goals, social goals, right? Goals about their relationships in family, understanding the dynamics, and the family concepts. Right.
So would you say, because you're talking about goals, right? So would you say, like setting goals would equal to giving the person a new purpose in life? Something to strive for?
I think purpose is more of a philosophical concept, and I'm a clinician myself. I think we stick to clinical terms, things that can be explained and measured. Obviously, I really believe that not everything can be explained, right? But in my understanding, when we talk about goals that, and people achieve the goals, that will bring a new purpose in their life, right? So this is kind of philosophical, right? But then a lot of things are changing. And if patients are really, truly committed to their recovery, that's what is happening in their life. They face a new purpose in their life. And then I have to talk about 12-step programs. I'm a real big believer and supporter of 12-step programs. And as a matter of fact, some of our offices, volunteer the space for, those volunteer organizations.
Like AA, NA?
A's and A's to, run meetings and things like that. But because I truly believe this is a lifelong process.
Right.
So the patient needs to know his or her own resources.
Right.
One of the major resources would be AAs and NAs, right? And I've seen very successful people, sober, clean for many, many years, executives running big companies, being in a position where a lot of people looking at their face and expecting an answer. Right? So those are the people who say what to do. And those are people in recovery. By saying this, I wanted to tell everyone the message. We do recover. We do recover, right? So, and there is a hope. There is a hope to this. But there is a lot of work to do to get or to achieve that point. And it starts from a decision to change the life.
Right.
Dr.
And hope,
Albert.
doing what we're doing now is also giving hope, right? Hope in real time.
I truly hope that we're giving hope to people.
We hope we're giving hope.
We're giving hope.
That you're hopeful.
Dr. Albert, it's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for all the wonderful insight.
Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely, thank you.
I guess that's